kick things off, it might be useful, Jenna, if you give just a few words on LMAX, the platform, who you are, what you're doing, and that'd be helpful.
Sure, thank you. So LMAX Digital is an institutional-only crypto exchange owned by the LMAX Group. So traditionally, LMAX have run FX exchanges around the globe, having data centers in London, New York, and Tokyo. In 2017, we started getting our FX guys, so primarily the non-bank institutions, approaching us and asking, how do they, or where can they trade institutionally on the crypto side? So they were heavily vested in terms of market making on retail platforms, but didn't really have a venue to match with like-minded participants and essentially lay off some of the risk that they were facing on the retail exchanges. So given that that's what we do in FX, we took it away, we had a look, and in reality, it was pretty much the same as what we do in FX. Same software, new hardware, and of course, go and learn a bit about the blockchain, understand how to store Bitcoin and safely look after those for the institutional clients. So from conversation in 2017, we were up and running in May 2018, which was fantastic. And then there was the regulatory piece. As a group, we're heavily regulated across jurisdictions. And we had to go and work out what we were going to do on the digital side. And pretty quickly, after our research, we landed in Gibraltar, met with Joey very early on, and we went through the process of achieving the DLT license, which has been, phenomenal for us and our growth in the last few years.
I mean, LMAX, and the numbers are really impressive. You're talking about $2 billion a day on average, and I think 8 to 10% of market share, so just behind Coinbase. So it's really significant. But what your background, sort of pre-LMAX, was, I think, at UBS and Canton. These guys, you've moved from the traditional world to the digital world, let's say. What are the? I mean, why do you think that's happening? Or why did that happen? Or why is LMAX Digital so relevant now?
I think fundamentally for us, the biggest overlap that we see in the two is actually it's the same customer. So when we talk about institutional crypto, we talk less about funds and asset managers and pensions at this stage, but we see a lot of HFT and proprietary trading firms doing the bulk of the trading. So we had those guys already. They came to us. That's why we created LMAX Digital. And really, it was just about facilitating their needs. And very quickly, I mean, we've only actually onboarded 500 institutional clients in the last few years. And amongst those, on a given day, you might only have 100 of those trading, and yet we're achieving $2 billion of activity. Yeah, it is a private investor market. It's retail galore, we know that. But those retail guys have to trade against somebody, and it's those market makers that we're sort of servicing.
And do you see, I mean, you're talking about markets, or specifically for LMAX on the FX side. I mean, are there more and more of the FX platforms and groups sort of coming across and converging? Is that sort of a trend or not really? Do you see it sort of natural or not?
Yeah, absolutely, because fundamentally it's actually the EFX trading guys that are trading crypto. It's the same desks, it's the same styles, they use the same infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, I think the stats are 45% of the LMAX Digital clients today trade FX with our group. So it's almost one and the same, and you might question who are the other 55%. They're actually just the banks. They're the only ones that aren't really trading with us today.
And I mean, they're very different markets, obviously, the FX market to the crypto market, but and the LMAX numbers on that side are like really big, 20 billion or so a day. But I mean, do you see those numbers like coming close together? Very difficult question, but
yeah, I mean, so from a volumes perspective, we do 10%. The crypto side of our business does 10% of the overall group. From a revenue perspective, we do 30% of the group revenues. So it's exciting. We're pleased with it.
And then, I mean, and the kinds of platforms you mentioned, the institutional market, and I mean, institutionalization of FX is something that everyone has seen over many years. What do you think? And what's going to continue to drive institutional adoption? Is it? I mean, is it regulation? Is it the market generally? Is it inefficiencies in the market? Are the price, is it so lucrative a market financially that everyone, that's the driver, or?
So going back to a lot of what we do is the proprietary trading firms, we obviously we're talking internally all the time, how are we going to get the funds and asset managers to start engaging with us and the banks? Firstly, on the bank side of things, in 2018, we went to the 35 banks that trade FX with us and said, okay, guys, you can have our market data feed now. By the way, we do crypto. And every one of them looked very blankly at us. And it was a bit scary because you just assume it would be a natural transition, but actually it's not. Fast forward 3.5 years since our launch day, and a third of those banks now take the market data. So in my opinion, in another 3.5 years from here, I expect that a third of them will be trading with me, and I expect that all 35 of them will have to take market data at that stage. So we know the needle's moving, we're seeing it, it's just a timing. What I would say in terms of the adoption, there are still roadblocks. We're still facing issues. So we look at it very, I mean, we have to compare to FX. That's what we know. That's what we've been doing for the last decade. And we talk about the ABC of crypto. That's how we bracket what's going on. So access, banking, and credit. For us, they're the three roadblocks that are really critical and the obstacles for the real money institutions sent to the space. Market access. Now, as a private investor market, as a retail-driven market, it's pretty fragmented. The infrastructure is not really there for institutions to really be heavily involved. And hopefully LMAX Digital, which is proven technology, we're hopeful that we're providing part of that ecosystem, and we're helping that to mature. The next couple of bits we can't really add much value to, but they're important, right? Banking, not necessarily the banks trading it. Of course we want that, but household bank names need to bank crypto, and it's quite different from the Greengrave story because we're talking about institutions here. We need banks with larger balance sheets than the firms that they're banking. So LMAX Digital, a regulated exchange out of Gibraltar, and for instance a crypto native fund, they need to go to a real bank with a big name and a very large balance sheet, a balance sheet that's sufficiently more than their own. And today there are still a lot of AML concerns with the banks. So that's kind of an evolving conversation. Yeah. It seems to be getting better, but we're still stuck in a rut.
So I mean, and if you say the 500 clients, you talk about an institutional market and adoption and the banking hurdles, etc. So when you talk about who are the institutions? Who are the core?
Yes,
without giving names,
it's lightly termed institutional. So a lot of small proprietary trading firms that have proven strategies. Proven strategies that. On the back of that, they've managed to raise sort of 100, 200 million at a time. Right now, it's a lot of retail brokerages, so we face some retail flow indirectly via them. There are some corporations and there are some funds, but the funds are still quite small. So like a very large fund in crypto is probably $300 million, but in real money terms, that's still very insignificant.
And are they, the markets or the platforms that you're dealing with, is it Bitcoin and Ethereum focused still?
Totally, yeah. I think 85 to 90% of what we do is still Bitcoin and Ethereum. And just to finish on the ABC, the credit piece for us is so critical. We need to be pragmatic in adopting some traditional methods because, in FX, prime brokerage solutions resolve capital inefficiencies, and in crypto, an active trader or a market maker cannot fund 30 different exchanges that they want to trade at. And until we get some credit intermediation into this space, I think we're going to struggle to take this mainstream and to have the real institutions come into crypto.
Oh, when is that? I mean, you've lived it since whenever it was,
yeah.
a long time back, and we've seen massive jumps and exponential growth, to an extent adoption. I mean, people talk about it much more comfortably today than they did 5 years ago. What's going to happen in the next 3 or 5 years? What's your?
So yeah, we think it's another 3 to 5 years from where we are today. So we typically say we've been doing it for 3 to 5 years now. Same time again. We think the credit element will be addressed. People are talking about prime services right now. It's not full-on prime brokerage where they're taking risk, but they're starting the processes of offering all the services under one umbrella. Firms are almost becoming banks in the crypto space by having so many different arms, lending, trading elements. So I think it's coming. I think it's still a while away, but until that piece is resolved, we won't get pension funds allocating 5% to crypto, unfortunately. But when it does, that's huge, right? When we've traded, I think, 420 billion in 2021 with the 500 clients. If pension funds start allocating only 5%, which wouldn't be too bad a risk for them, what does that open? Where does Bitcoin go from here, price-wise, but also sort of market cap-wise? The potential is huge.
Numbers are huge. I mean, I think everyone took a lot of notice back whenever it was a year or so ago with Elon Musk and the whole Tesla thing. And that was effectively, whatever it was, 2.7% of the cash exposure to BTC. It was seen as a gigantic. But if that starts to happen across the S&P 500 or something, they're big numbers. But what about the? I mean, challenges in terms of you're relevant. Let's say you're tracing Coinbase today. Who are the biggest risks? Is it going to be Goldman Sachs's OTC trading desk that suddenly takes you over, or
I think they'll take my liquidity. Honestly, I don't think. I really think we come at this market as exchange operators. Genuinely, we're still learning the crypto bit, and I think we'll be learning that forever. We run exchanges, 5 of them around the world. One happens to be solely for crypto. A lot of the other exchanges come at it that they know everything about crypto, but we know when Bitcoin drops by 10K in a spike a few weeks ago, they go into maintenance, right? That's not what we do. We're just up, we run exchanges, and we're very much learning about crypto. So I don't really like to talk about competition. I highly commend the Coinbases of the world. They're doing a fantastic job. 56 million users, that scares the life out of me. What would I do with them? How would I look after them? We're just not geared up for that.
And I got to ask a question because we were talking about it with the DeFi sort of universe or the DEX universe. But what about those guys? I mean, what about those platforms? What about those liquidity pools? Is that a competition? Is that something?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I think DeFi probably is going to transform capital markets. We're aware of that. But we run centralized exchanges at LMAX Group. So it's tough. What we've tried to do internally is work out how can we be part of that? How can we contribute to DeFi? And actually, recently we become part of the PIF network. So, submitting our market data over the blockchain, that's us being part of DeFi without sort of changing what we do for a living.
And other than those guys, or let's call it the competition, maybe very general question, but what are the other challenges? What are the limiters to LMAX? Is it law and regulation in hundreds of countries? Is it restriction after restriction that suddenly starts to be introduced? What do you think
I think regulatory clarity for really our clients is super important, because we're pretty comfortable doing what we're doing. We love being in Gibraltar, but that doesn't really help when a lot of your clients are offshore entities essentially from the US. If they don't have clarity, you can't really get their full potential. So yes, regulation's huge, and whatever that regulation changes to or becomes, we'll just fit into it. We're heavily regulated as a group, it's what we do. We'll just work around the frameworks. But in other jurisdictions, it's not quite as straightforward as what we receive and how we adhere to principles. So regulation, sure. Banking, we touched on that. Custody as well, right? We're actually a custodian. We don't really want to be a custodian. We just want to match buyers and sellers on an exchange. We need some trusted custodians. We need some real traditional custodians to come to the market, and we're pretty agnostic. There's no preference over any of them. We'd just like to do the trade and give up the settlement to the client's choice of custodian. And I think a custodian network of trusted counterparties could again really help mature the ecosystem.
And then, I mean, I've got other questions. I'm not sure how we are on time, but yeah, we've got, like you've talked about servicing the institutional, an institutional customer base. It was also public. I mean, LMAX became sort of a target for an institutional investment, equity investment, the JC Flowers investment. Is that the direction of travel? Are the larger investment groups looking at exposure to these markets, not by buying and owning BTC, but by buying and owning the platforms? Is that something natural? Well, I mean, is that a one-off? Is it, yeah?
VC space in crypto right now is insane, right? We're seeing some numbers that have never been seen before in any asset class. 100%, everyone wants exposure to crypto in some form or another, and I think you're probably right. A lot of them aren't allowed to just go and buy it outright. The JC Flowers & Co investment's an interesting one because actually they have invested in us as exchange operators, so irrelevant of it being FX or crypto. But that said, they're super gassed by the crypto element because it is their first investment in crypto. Obviously, their connections for us will be amazing because that might just help the banks and the larger institutions come over into the space. But I don't want to say for us in particular in that situation that it was that, but I think they like it.
No, I mean,
yeah. And getting approval, whether you're an investment firm or a bank, is tough. Someone told me at an event yesterday that they're at a large bank and that they'd had 48 signatures on the green light to start looking properly at crypto. 48 signatures. I mean, how long has that taken?
Gosh. And is it? I mean, when you talk about, I mean, I'm going to ask you a random question because I mean, Gibraltar. I did a few bits on sort of the ecosystem here, and it's a really impressive set of numbers, obviously including LMAX. In the UK, we've read like things that are published about some of the issues of dealing with the FCA, and I mean, the registration process, which many firms have been there for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, is that, and it's not just the UK. I mean, this is happening in many. I think in Singapore there are about 450 applications that are going through the MAS at the moment, and I think they've issued one license in principle. Is that creating uncertainty in the UK? Do you see? I mean, do you see Gibraltar as a natural fit for that? I mean, we have many other links, etc.
Well, funnily enough, it's good timing because there was an event in London yesterday, and a number of people have actually told me that they've pulled out of the FCA registration. Yeah. And I think that says it all. Yeah. So why would you go through that process?
More frightening than that is that I've heard the FCA direct one or two of those to register in Ireland, which is I thought quite interesting. But is that? I mean, that uncertainty at the moment, people are still going through that process.
It's also just a registration. I think we need to remind ourselves of that, right? Well, it's a very long process to have a registration. It's almost an application for a regulation. Yeah, but I mean, it essentially is the AML directive.
Well, exactly. And last year, I think there was that public consultation in the UK around the actual regulation of the space. When that comes into effect, that's a very different universe and ballgame. But I think we're pretty much out of time. So thank you very much for that, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thank you all.